Hello, everybody, and welcome to this one-off InfoSec Live special BlackHat. My name's Simon Linstead. I'm your host and got a treat in store for you today. I'm joined by Daniel Kelley, really well known for being the TalkTalk hacker. When he was 15 years old, he ended up getting sentenced when he was 21 to 4 years in jail for his part in, I think it's the biggest British technology firm's hack in history. So without further ado, you'll notice that his camera's off. There's some reasons for that. He is a very dashing, handsome young man. I'll bring him on now and do the intro. Daniel, thanks ever so much for joining me.
Thanks.
Firstly, before we start, so I haven't really done you much justice with the intro. So for the viewers that don't know who you are, would you just give us an overview of, I suppose, what you're best known for?
Yeah, so I was arrested in 2015 for my role in the TalkTalk hack. What a lot of people don't realize is that there were a lot of other offenses, not just the TalkTalk hack. So, I used to go around and basically hack websites and steal data from websites and extort the website owners and founders.
Okay, and what? No, I'll come back to that. I was going to say what got you into that, but that's obviously a long story. You spent, I think, you got a 4-year sentence, and you ended up at, I think you said 21 or 22 years old. You ended up in a Category A prison here in the UK, which is called HMP Belmarsh, or for those that have stayed there or know anyone who's stayed there, I think the terminology is Hellmarsh. And I can only imagine what it was like for you in there at that age, Daniel. So before we get to your journey in prison and how that went, let's go back to a bit of background on you. So where did you grow up? What did you do as a child? How did you end up, I suppose, being interested in computers is the final question.
So I'm from a small town in South Wales called Llanelli. And there's not much to do around here, to be honest. There's I think the population is something like 30,000. When I had a relatively normal childhood. I didn't have many friends though. I didn't really like socializing. A lot of my time was spent pretty much in front of a computer screen playing online games. And that's how I used to interact with the world. So I'd speak to people on Skype and sort of play these online games basically.
What games were you playing? Any in particular?
So a big one was World of Warcraft. I used to play this PvP system, right? So we play competitively, and I must have put in thousands of hours. I was playing 8 to 12 hours a day every single day for months on end. So yeah,
it's like a full-time job.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, the only thing I can link that to, obviously, I'm a fair bit older than you, Daniel, but my now 17-year-old, or 17 this week, when he was younger, he used to play, I think it was Clash of Clans on his phone, and got a bill through from Apple for, I think it was £1,127, something like that. And upon looking at it further, it was for gems. I think he'd bought himself a load of gems because I didn't have the security settings on my own phone. He was on my family sharing for Apple.
Yeah.
And the worst thing is, then fast forward a few years, my now 13-year-old son, he did the same on a completely different game on my family account. So that was the point for me where I learned that things had to be a bit more secure, even in the family environment. But so how did it get from World of Warcraft to learning about the more, I suppose, technical and, dare I say, more malicious aspects?
Yeah. So there's to be honest, the story is quite long and detailed, but the basic outline is, so I used to play World of Warcraft a lot, right? I played so much that it got to the point where I was within the top 20 teams in the world, and this is on a game that has over 8 million players, right? So anyway, we're queuing one night, so we're going against this specific team, and before the game starts, my internet disconnects, and to cut the story short, after doing like research and stuff, and looking at online forums, I sort of came across the methodology that this guy had used. Like he basically DDoSed my internet, so I couldn't win the game. So like it was 2v3, right? So like we kept on like losing against this specific team, and obviously finding those forums like gave me exposure to a lot of different things. Like not everyone was on there to cheat on games, right? So
So hold on, that they were using a DDoS attack to
mm.
knock out one or more of the players in a group to make sure basically that they won the game.
Yeah, so that's basically what was happening. So like at the time we used to use Skype. So we'd all like join a Skype call. We'd then queue in the game and like play against other teams. But with Skype, when you used to call people, it would store their IP address on your computer. So with that, you can take like their IP address, right? And then you can DDoS the IP address. But sometimes, so this comes into the fact that like sometimes I would call players on opposite teams because at a high level in this game, it's really condensed.
Yeah,
So you always go against the same players, same teams, just like anything, right?
yeah.
So like the opposite team, one of them must have gotten my IP address, and like I ended up like every time you went against this specific team, I get DDoS, and you always used to be two players against three basically, and it was impossible to win, right? So yeah.
So I take it you turned the tables then, Daniel, and DDoSed them back. Is that how it started?
Well, yeah, that's fair to say, right? Because I'm not just going to keep playing the game and keep losing against this specific team. But the thing is, what you have to remember is that I had played this game so much that I actually had a like certain skill set on this game. So I got to where I was through skill, and I wasn't about to like ruin all like the hard work and that skill set by just like cheating and like DDoSing people. So what I would do is I'd use this like a DDoS only this specific team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did it become like an ongoing battle? Did you start
Well,
tit for tat DDoSes every day, or?
well, yeah. This is funny to outsiders, but like this is pretty much what happened, right? And the thing is, a lot of other people like started to like connect the dots together, and eventually, at the high end of this game, you had like I'd say like most teams just DDoSing people. Like the game wasn't even about skill anymore. You would just queue into a game, and it would basically be who can like DDoS each other the fastest. So that's where the game had sort of gotten to.
So for you then, at that point, I mean, as you
Mm.
just said, it was important to you that you were winning through the skill aspect rather than, the constant cheating. I take it that was the end
Mm.
of the World of Warcraft journey for you. What happened next?
Yeah, so like after that, I stopped playing the game. Like I was really going nowhere with it because it was just cheating. Like the game wasn't fun anymore. So eventually, like a point came where I sort of like made this undesired like transition into so like I stopped playing this game and basically I went back to these forums. Like I started looking at other material. Like I started reading into website development, programming, like all these different topics which I guess could like be covered under cybersecurity. And
Yeah.
that's where like this sort of transition took place basically. And that's where like my first real like exposure was to this type of thing.
And did it excite you? Because I
Mm,
mean, a lot more recently for me, but when I trained or tried to be a pen tester a couple of years
mm,
ago, the whole getting a shell experience was like when I caught my first wave when I learned to surf when I was in my 20s. It was, well, not as
yeah.
exhilarating perhaps in a salt water in your face kind of way, but in the I feel
Mm,
like I've achieved something really good kind of way. It does get a little bit addictive. I mean, for me, I ended up getting obsessed with the gamification platforms like Hack the Box while I was trying to go
mm.
to OSCP. So how did you then upskill on that? What happened?
So like at first, I didn't really learn. Like I didn't read into website hacking and like methodology. I started off with web development, so like I started off building my own websites. Learning about operating systems and just basic things like that. And then I realized that you could take a lot of the concepts that are applied to like building websites and like learn about methodology with hacking websites. So like if you understand how a website works, right, you can essentially use the concepts to hack into the website.
Yeah.
And I guess I sort of, I came across one day, like I came across this thread on this forum, and it basically contained like methodology to use Google to find vulnerable websites. It wasn't anything like sophisticated. So you could basically enter like this search operator into Google, and it would return like a list of vulnerable websites. So anyway, after learning like this really basic like methodology, I come across this website which belongs to like a school in America, and I managed to log into like the admin panel of this school, and I basically defaced the homepage of this school, right? But the thing is, I must have been 13, so you can imagine like the feeling.
I can even picture what you defaced it with, because I know what I'd have defaced it with at 13.
No, it wasn't that bad. No, it was the picture of like a troll face, right?
Yeah.
You know the white one. Yeah, it was that. It wasn't it was nothing explicit. Put it that way.
Even then, you had some good in you, Daniel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why did you do that? Think about it. So looking back now, what are you now? 25, did you say?
Yeah, 25.
25. So looking back at 12, 13-year-old Daniel, why did you do that?
The thing is, like back then, it was just fun. Like, like I'm sure if you asked any 13-year-old, like, well, why did you do it? They're not going to come back and say to become a millionaire, right? Or something like that. It's just purely fun. And, a part of me as well didn't I didn't think I'd be able to do it. So like when I did it, it came as a shock to like my system. I was like, oh, it actually worked. So there was a bit of disconnect there as well. But like after that, I sort of started doing like good things. Like so after that specific hack, right? I started looking for vulnerabilities in like other websites, but I had like good intent. So one day I'm looking at like loads of Fortune 500 companies, like massive, like Microsoft, Adobe,
Yeah.
and I come across a vulnerability on Microsoft. But it wasn't like a big vulnerability. It was just like a small vulnerability on Microsoft. But this time I take the vulnerability that I found on Microsoft and I report it to them. So in 2012, Microsoft were running a like responsible disclosure program. So you could go to them with like bugs and vulnerabilities, give them like a proof of concept, and they'd so what they would do is they put your name on their website. It's like a Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's what happened after I hacked that school. I didn't continue with like malicious intent or anything or do anything for fun. Like I sort of I changed direction. I went in like a good direction rather than a bad direction. So yeah.
So what made you change direction? Did anything happen? Anything happen in your life at the time? Was there a kind of catalyst that I suppose pushed you over the edge to do something that perhaps you knew was a bit more wrong than what you'd done already?
No, so I think this is where a lot of people like I think people have different expectations in contrast to like reality. Like when I was 13, I didn't see like right or wrong. Like that's not how it was, internally. Like what I did to the school was fun and nothing more, nothing less. Like I didn't think of it as like, oh, this is illegal, this is wrong. The police are going to come and find me. Like it just didn't surface like internally like that.
No.
So I was never on like one side. Like I was just doing things and sort of seeing where like I could go with them. Like, so I did that with the school, but then like with Microsoft, well, they were running a bug bug bounty program, so I reported the vulnerability to them. I was never like at that point. I was never like set on going on one side.
So it was more
Mm.
down to your natural inquisitiveness
Mm.
and your desire to learn and your desire to, I suppose, achieve things that
Yeah.
ended up taking you down that road, I suppose. And you know, it is a really grey line sometimes with crime in general, and especially as you rightly said, internalizing whether you're committing a crime at 13 years old. I know what I
Mm.
was thinking about at 13, and you know, again, I'm completely with you,
Yeah.
Daniel. I don't think it would have gone through my mind either. But there must have been a point where you knew you'd done something that was wrong.
Yeah. Well, so with that like specific hack, it's like at that point, I honestly didn't think about it. But what happened, like what inevitably happened, is so I hacked that school. I reported a vulnerability to Microsoft, and then I started to like look for loads of vulnerabilities in different companies, and like I'd collect these vulnerabilities, but I'd keep reporting them. Like I keep trying to help companies, right, in hopes that they'd give me the same response as Microsoft. But they never did, like not one of them. So I had, at one point I must have had like well over 30 vulnerabilities in like large companies. Like these were some like big companies, and like one day, you know, I started to associate with like these people on these like forums, and like I was just sitting on all of these vulnerabilities basically. And one day, like I decided to share all of these vulnerabilities with all the people that I sort of met on these forums, because like they weren't responding. Like these were vulnerabilities that I tried
Yeah,
to report. There was no response. So I thought, well, what am I supposed to do with them? Like I wasn't just going to leave them there. So anyway, I shared them with like these people on these forums that I'd met. But the difference was these people that I'd met were like criminals. They weren't like 13-year-old me, right? That was one like had one leg in each direction.
yeah.
Like they were purely doing things for profit. Like it was all malicious intent. It was like stealing data, and that's how my criminality got started. I think that's what you're like asking, and
Yeah, I think
yeah,
it is because
yeah,
you know we've chatted offline, and
mm,
for people who know me, they'll also know checkered history as well. And I've made some seriously in my life, and
mm,
two things out of that. One, I think everyone deserves the second chance, and obviously I would say that based on what I've just said, but I think it's important. And
mm,
and secondly, I suppose I never knew when I crossed that line. So the question was a genuine one because your behavior
yeah,
sort of blurs, or it did for me when I was a teenager. And so it wasn't a trip you up question. It was more of a
mm.
naturally interested because of my own history.
Yeah. I think what a lot of people have a difficulty like realizing as well is that with cybercrime, there's a level of abstraction. Like in real life, if you're 13 years old and you decide to commit an offense, well, like if you're like dealing drugs or something, it's quite obvious. It's a lot more clear because
Yeah.
it's right in front of you. But when I was 13, when I was in front of a computer, there was like a level. So firstly, like I didn't interact well in a social environment. So there were like self-absorption issues. Like I didn't socialize much with people. So I would have had like less of an understanding of the impact of like my actions.
Do you
And
think
yeah.
going back to what you said earlier about the obviously with the Microsoft, you
Mm,
get kind of recognition and put on the board. You go to these other companies, you get absolutely zero response. From knowing what I was like as a teen, I'm not saying you were like this, but it's as though the people gave you the attention that you needed. I'd say, I'm not going to say they were
mm,
grooming you, Daniel, because this may be a little bit strong, but if these were criminals, lurking in these online forums,
mm.
They'd have known exactly what to do to manipulate you. It's just a thought.
Yeah, that's a real possibility, but it's difficult to say because later on, like throughout my offending, I acted on my own with a lot of things. But
Okay.
perhaps you're right in like regards to like how I started off, right? So perhaps they had like a strong influence on me, and perhaps I
Well,
decided to go
you've got to
down.
think as
Hmm.
well. If you're getting, for the first people, you're getting that kind of well done and team spirit, or I suppose, that pat on the back that we need, then you would naturally, through muscle memory of your brain, relate that to feelings of wellness and success. So it makes sense if at such a young age you've been formed into, thinking that then perhaps the behavior patterns then form off the back of that. I'm not a psychologist, by the way. I just read too many books.
No, like I agree. I, I think it's hard to argue with you, right? Like they would have definitely had some form of influence
My
on me.
wife would
Uh,
disagree with that. She's ever so developed.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
sorry.
no, like they would have had some influence on me for sure. So perhaps at the beginning of like, perhaps I went down the direction I went in because like of that influence, right? But later on, like I know that wasn't the case. So yeah.
Well, let's talk about later on then. Let's talk about how
Mm,
it went from the college to the disappointment to the kind of peer
mm.
congratulations that you got off the forum people that you were associating with. You then what happened? What happened next?
So so I shared all of those vulnerabilities, and I started to form like closer bonds with these people, right? Like I was typing to them on a daily basis, and you're talking like 8 hours a day. Like I'm typing to these people. I never spoke to them, but still typing to someone for what 8 hours a day. It's
Yeah.
quite a lot. So like we started like hacking things like in a group. And the thing is, because I was new to all of it, I sort of started learning things off them. Like they were teaching me methodology. So I felt at the same time like I was learning. So the
Yeah.
more I like engaged with them, the more I was like benefiting on a personal level because it was like satisfying my curiosity, right? So we start like hacking things in a group. And like it essentially got to a point where money got involved. Like a few of these people decided that money was going to be like the main objective in a lot of these hacks. So we'd go around like we'd hack loads of different websites. We'd like exfiltrate the data from a lot of these websites. And obviously, the one of the easiest ways to like get money from a company you've hacked is to just extort them because you've got data. It's like effortless in contrast to anything else. So we started like sending off emails to like these website owners, and we were like, look, this is an amount to pay, or customer data has been released. And I sort of went with it. Like I ended up hacking things. I was sharing like I was giving them access to different things that I'd hacked, you know and it just sort of like spiraled from there. And like when I stopped like engaging with them, I guess I continued. And that's where I have to like have some accountability for myself, right? Because I could have stopped, but I didn't. And it was only when I was arrested in 2015 for the TalkTalk hack when I actually stopped, basically.
So
So yeah.
when did you when did you kind of go it alone? And I suppose the next question is, why
Mm.
did you end up going it alone? What happened?
So like I was never completely alone. Like when I say alone, so I was very active in like various networks and hacking communities. Like there's online forums, there's IRC channels, there's like group chats, like all over the place.
Yeah.
And I was like very active in a lot of these different networks. And I was even like a moderator on a private um forum for like criminals, and I used to like manage this forum, right? So I was responsible for like managing the content, approving like applications and stuff. So when like, just to clarify, when I say alone, like I mean like looking at one like a target to hack or something. Like
Yeah.
I always had association to some extent, but I think I decided in like early 2015 is when I started to like hack things on my own and like extort website owners, because there was this 3 month like interval where it became like I essentially went on like a hacking spree. As bad as it sounds, like I over the space of 3 months, you know, I hacked over 20 or 30 different websites.
What
I'm gonna,
there must have been something that triggered it.
um
Was it fear of being caught? Did you want to get caught? Have you ever? I mean, you've had like 2 years in Hellmarsh to think about it. Did you
yeah,
spend much time thinking
mm,
that?
this is the thing, right? Like a lot of people, I get asked all the time, like, why did I do it? But
Excuse me.
like it sounds like ridiculous, but like the only thing that I can put it down to is like serious like self-absorption issues. Like I didn't have like a real incentive. It's gonna sound like a lot of people are gonna listen to this and think like, well, that can't be true. But is this the honest answer? Because I could sit here today and I could say like, oh, it was the money, it was this, it was that, but none of that's like true. Like it was very it was just a lot of it was just based on opportunity. So like I was having fun because I was hacking websites. There was a technical challenge. B, I was like, so I was stealing data. I was like, getting internal access. And B was like giving me access. It was giving me something to do with the data, right? So I'd hack into a company, I'd steal data, and then it would like sort of put me in like a dilemma where it was like, well, what next? Like that type of thinking. Like, well, what do I do with this data now? And yeah, I just ended up like blackmailing a lot of people. It's I've thought this is something I've thought about for like a long time, and I honestly don't have an answer. You know.
Look,
Mm,
I don't think people will think it's weird. And I
mm,
look back at my kind of crash when everything went wrong for me,
yeah.
and I've blamed lots of things for that.
Mm,
But really, it was all down to my mindset and where my head was at the time, and my head wasn't in a particularly good place.
mm,
And it's all very well us both sitting here reflecting on previous behaviours and feeling awful about it and addressing it, but it doesn't change the fact that it was all a bit of a blur probably when it happened, because it was for me,
yeah.
and then it snowballs and snowballs and snowballs. And I
Yeah.
suppose, I mean, my kind of tipping point was two things really. One, nearly dying when coming off my motorbike. At the same time, when I was an absolute alcoholic kind of mess, and it was the jolt of knowing that I could potentially be losing not only my life but kind of everything around me that shook me back in the end, I suppose, which is what prison did for you and gave you that chance to then start to be a different person. Because let's not forget, I mean, I look at myself 10 years ago to now, and I think genetically or biologically, we are different people every 7 years because our cells change. And,
Mm,
you're still got the same name, Daniel, but you're clearly a completely different person to what you were at the time. And before we move on to how you got caught and then the hell of prison,
mm,
what about what have you learned from it? I mean, let's not talk about what you've learned from the criminal justice system, because I know we've got the same conversation, Simon. So let's skim over that and think about what you've learned from it yourself, because you've had time to reflect, and
Yeah.
people will find out why you've had so much time when you were in jail to reflect, perhaps more than other people a bit later. But what's your biggest takeout from it? What's the thing that you wake up each day now and think, not I wish I hadn't done
Mm.
that, because that's an easy thing to say. Is there anything that you think now? Anything?
So there's two answers. So the first answer is like, my criminality taught me a lot. If I didn't engage, minus the blackmail, if I didn't engage in all of that computer hacking and like spend time learning all of that methodology, I wouldn't have been able to do what I did later on in life. We'll like help it. Like we'll get onto it later. We're like helping companies and stuff. But there's certain elements of my criminality that I don't regret. I don't regret like the process of hacking into websites. What I regret is the malicious part, like blackmail, stealing data, everything where there's a victim. I regret. That's one of the worst things I've ever done. And then the second answer is like, well, it comes a bit later on. So like, TalkTalk itself was a really high profile hack at the time, and to summarize everything that I've like been through in the last 7 years would be impossible on this podcast. But
It's all right. We've got another 5 episodes.
yeah, yeah, but like there's so many things, right, that I had to go through that like most normal people in their lifetime wouldn't go through. So like when I was arrested, um, like the national media, they went around all of my family's houses, my grandparents, everyone, and they were harassed for like weeks on end. Like there were tents outside my house just waiting for me to come out so they could like jump at the opportunity to speak to me. um then I was on I was on bail for 4 years, and I became like severely depressed on bail. I lost like I used to be really overweight. I lost over 7 stone, right? Like I went
Wow.
down to 100. Yeah, I went down to 105 pounds. So like all of this has like been part of my life for like almost a decade. It's like almost part of my identity because you put my name in Google, there's no hiding from it.
Well, we'll come back to that
Yeah.
later, and I think the fact you're on here shows that you're not hiding
Mm,
from it. And again, we had the same conversation offline earlier where we talked about the importance of holding our hands up to our mistakes, and it
mm,
is that acceptance and ownership and doing everything you can to kind of repay it that
mm.
allows you to move on in your life. I think if you try and hide it or push it under the carpet, it would just come back and bite you at a different point. But let's get back to the story. So you're kind of on your own, but you're not. You're doing hacks on your own. How did you get caught?
So well, so one of the companies, so in 2015, like one of the companies that I ended up blackmailing was TalkTalk, and that was a big mistake because I didn't realize at the time like how big they were. Because obviously a lot of people have heard of TalkTalk, but to me it was just like a company. I didn't really realize how big they actually were. But at the time that I blackmailed the CEO of TalkTalk, I also attacked another company, and this company was based in London, and it was a lot smaller. And what I had done is I'd used Tor, which is like this private network to anonymize your IP address for TalkTalk. But with this smaller company, I only used a VPN.
Ah,
So I supplied a Bitcoin address for the payment to be made in TalkTalk's hack, and I supplied the same Bitcoin address for this smaller company. And this smaller company had reported like my hack to the police, the same police that were investigating TalkTalk. So all they did is cross-reference the Bitcoin address, and then they realized, well, it's the same. It's me behind them both. They then investigated the smaller hack. When this is just a theory, by the way, but like I'm almost, quite certain this is how it took place. But they went to like they investigated this smaller hack, and they approached the VPN provider that I used, and the VPN provider handed over my IP address to the police, and that is pretty much how I got caught. Well, that's my theory anyway, which it's
Well, I
quite
think
credible.
the biggest takeout from that for any criminals watching who use VPNs is I wouldn't bother. It's what? Okay. Well, obviously, I suppose ethically they've done the right thing by going to the police with that completely. How's that work from a legal point of view if you're providing a VPN service? But anyway, let's move on from that before we start causing ourselves both trouble for making the wrong comments on a recording. So they, I take it your door got kicked in, your life got turned upside down. What happened next?
Yeah, so like I was out, like I remember. So I was out, and I got a phone call from my dad, and when my dad was on the phone, all that I could hear in the back was someone saying not to tell me something. But what it had turned out was that there was a police officer behind my dad, and the police officer was trying to tell my dad to come home, but not to say that the police were in my house. Well, my dad told me that the police were in my house, right? So anyway, I'm not going to go on the run at like 16, to cyber criminal at 16, So anyway, I end up going like down my street. My entire street's closed off. There's like 4 police vans, like 20 police officers. Scotland Yard are there, the National Crime Agency are there, my local police unit is there, my local cyber crime, there's like 5 agencies, 20 police officers, like all over my house. I walk past them because they don't recognize me. And then I
Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, so okay, so I go into my house, and like they basically arrest me, and they take everything from the house. They search like all the devices. They were in there for hours. I'm put in the back of an undercover police van. I'm put in between 2 police officers. I'm like so they put their blue lights on and everything. We get a 2 police car escort. Like, this is something like out of a film, honestly. At the time, you could swear I could have killed someone. So I get like a 2 police car escort all the way through my town centre. We get to our local police station in like under 2 minutes. They fast track me through the police station, so they like evacuate everyone. They tell everyone to get out, basically. And then they just interviewed me, and that was like the process of my arrest, pretty much.
How long did they interview you for?
So when they arrested me, it was like 5 at night. So they weren't like, they didn't want. I don't think they wanted to stay there too long, because these were police officers from London, so they had to get back on it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they had to get back on a train, right? But what they did was, at the end, after, like, I think it was an hour in total. But after these interviews, they bailed me to a police station in London. So that's basically where the real interviews were going to take place. Because the next time I went to London, I was there for, I think it was 14 hours or something, or just interviews. So, yeah.
And did it take long? I mean, you hear in the press at the moment, especially with the barristers going on strike recently, that there's fairly long delays for court cases, especially with COVID as well. Was the whole thing fast tracked? Not by the sounds of it, because you were what, 15, 16? How old were you when you got caught?
So so by the time I went to that first, by the time I went to the police station in London at first, I was 17 by then. So it had been like a couple of months. So I was 16 at the time of the arrest. But from there onwards, I was on bail for like 4 years. Like, a lot of people would think that the process would be fast tracked because of the high profile nature of the case. But in total, I was charged with like 30 different offences. So there were the complexities that like came with a lot of my offences were disputed in court. Like there were a lot of legal disputes, there were a lot of legal arguments, and
There are a lot of fees being earned by the sounds of it.
yeah, yeah, and yeah. So it took like 4 years in total before I got sentenced, and it's quite sad actually because I think I only ended up getting sentenced within 4 years because of my mental health. Like by the end of it, it was now becoming like a dispute of whether I'm going to go to prison or hospital. So that's why it took 4 years. I think if I hadn't gotten ill, it would have probably taken even longer. But yeah, so
Christ.
mm.
So let's talk through the court process. How long was the actual court? A week? 2 weeks? It must have been a lot of evidence, Daniel.
so I I pled guilty. This is
Oh,
so I was charged. Yeah, I was charged with 30 offences, and like the CPS were like really keen on not going to trial. Like it was put in writing that if I was to plead not guilty to 30 offences, and they were all computer hacking, blackmail, and fraud, we'd be looking at a trial for months, and
yeah.
it would go on for a ridiculous amount of time. So the CPS were very like keen to not go to trial basically. So my barrister managed to negotiate 30 charges down to 11, and at that point, I just sort of pled guilty to everything. Like I just wanted to get it out of the way as well.
Wanted it done.
Yeah, yeah.
So did you go into court for sentencing that day knowing you were looking at 4 years? What did you think you were looking at?
So this is the thing. Like with my offending is quite rare. Like there's not a lot of people that get charged with computer misuse. So I was getting like advice pretty much from all directions. Like my barrister told me I was going to get 12 years. My lawyer told me I was going to get five because of the blackmail, right? Blackmail. So
Oh,
blackmail
of
in the
course.
UK
Yeah.
is classified as like a serious offence.
Yeah.
Maximum sentence is like 14 years. But my lawyer was telling me I was going to get 5 years. I just didn't know what to think because like I was optimistic and I was like hoping, well, I don't know, perhaps I won't go to prison at all because it's
Of course you
computer.
were. Of
Yeah,
course you were.
it's computer
Anyone would
hacking.
anyone would have
Yeah,
done, Daniel. Everyone
yeah.
wants that not to be true,
Mm,
surely. And like you say, with a case with so much uncertainty, which is so untested, with a case
mm.
that high profile, I suppose I'm not going to make any comment on the sentencing at all either. I've got to think about what I'm going to say. This is recorded. So you didn't know what to expect then. So you're sitting there and you hear the words or the
Well,
sentence, and
yeah.
and then the infamous take him down, I suppose, which then I suppose meant a short few steps down into the holding cells until you then got shipped off to where you were to be processed. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, but so the thing is, my starting point was 12 years. My barrister was right. What actually had happened is that I walked into the courtroom, went into the dock, and the judge read out 12 years.
Oh my
But
goodness.
what he'd done is taken all the mitigating factors into consideration. So he goes from like 12 to like 10, 7, 6, and he's counting down. And he gets to four, and then eventually I'm like sent off to prison. But to first like hear that figure at 12 years, like that was a bit like unbelievable, really. Yeah.
So I suppose kind of sort of relief with the 4 initially.
Yeah.
If you can say relief to 4 years in jail.
Mm.
So so next then, was it the case, I take it family are in court, they're devastated, um, you get taken away, you know, just old enough to go to grown-up prison at that point, I suppose, as well,
Yeah.
and you were tried where? At the Old Bailey or
Yeah. So I was, all these court hearings were in the Old Bailey.
so you were taken down to the holding cells, and then where did they take you next? What happened next?
So in my situation, I was treated a bit differently in contrast to a lot of prisoners because my mental health was like awful. And what the judge had done is he'd gotten the head of healthcare in Belmarsh to sort of take responsibility for me. So we had all these psychiatrists like saying, look, I shouldn't go to prison because it'll be a death sentence, basically. And the judge decided to reach out to the head of healthcare in Belmarsh and get her to take responsibility for me. So I was taken from the Old Bailey to Belmarsh. I was put in healthcare for I think it was a month, and then I spent a month in healthcare, and I was eventually put in the main part of the prison.
So the healthcare part, I take it hospital-like or still prison-like? What was it like, Daniel? Paint the picture.
So, the thing is, in Belmarsh actually has a hospital ward. There's NHS like staff working there. It's it's prison, but so it's like a bit of both. What they have is a ward, and then they have cells, like individual cells outside the ward. But the interesting thing is that a lot of these cells were used to like house category A prisoners. So like let's say an incident happened throughout the prison. If someone got hurt, they would be taken to healthcare. So the level of protection or like security with these cells and like healthcare was absolutely ridiculous. Like you had bulletproof like windows, like outside each individual cell you had a cage, just so like to go from like inside my cell to the main like ward. You had to go through like four different doors. It was like the security in that type of prison is just unbelievable. But
And it's a category A, isn't it, Belmarsh?
yeah, so I think it's a category B, but it's classified as the highest security prison in the UK. Like houses Cat is. So yeah.
So a month on the ward, as it were, and then they tell you you're obviously off to the main prison population. Tell us how that went.
So I so like in Belmarsh you have triple cells and you have double cells. Like most prisoners share like a cell. But with me, because of the high profile like nature of my case, so if you put the news on that week, you would have seen my face at 5 o'clock because they like BBC and stuff. They kept repeating the same news. So the head of like security in Belmarsh and the head of healthcare basically come to this agreement where they sort of decided like I wasn't going to be sharing a cell. I was going to be high risk. I was going to be put in my own cell, and that's how I was going to like spend my time in Belmarsh. And even to this day, I think that's one of the best things that actually could have happened because in that type of prison,
You don't want to
my
share us.
no my type of put it this way, my type of the type of person that I would have been sharing a cell with would have been like a lifer, someone doing like 20, 30 years. Most people in that prison aren't doing small sentences.
Who
Like
who haven't who haven't really got an awful lot to lose, have they? At that point, either.
nothing at
No.
all. That's yeah.
So did you make friends? I suppose you don't really have a chance to make friends. What were you on, 18-hour lockdown then? How long were you locked up for each day?
So the regime was like in the morning you'd get 1 hour out, and then for the rest of the day you'd just be locked in your cell. That you get 1 hour per day out, and
So
like
it's
in that hour,
23-hour
yeah,
lockup.
yeah,
Yeah.
you'd be expected to like shower and pretty much do everything that you needed to do in one day, like 1 hour
Okay.
in
Well,
the
look,
entire day.
the prison system is meant to be about rehabilitation, right? It's meant to
Mm.
be about paying for your crimes and hopefully coming out a better person in a position to start contributing to society. What happened with regards to you rehabilitating in there? What did they extend opportunities for you to learn? Did they offer you any kind of access to, well, I suppose computers could be a bit iffy, but learning materials? What did you do?
No, so I I didn't spend my entire sentence in Belmarsh. I spent like I think it was 5 months there in total. And eventually, I was moved from Belmarsh to a prison in Wales because
Okay.
obviously I'm a Welsh prisoner, and it does make sense.
Yeah.
Problem is though, when I arrived in like this Welsh prison, I was seen as a massive security risk because down on paper, what you had was like a high-profile case, um, like an offence they'd never seen before, computer hacking, and then you had Belmarsh, a Category A prison. So, and they don't deal with prisoners that come from Belmarsh, especially in Wales.
Yeah.
So, so like I arrive at this prison and I'm basically treated like a very high security risk. Like they were like spinning my cell at random times. Um, I was banned from going to certain parts of the prison. I wasn't allowed to go to education because the security governor decided that I was too much of a risk because there were computers in the rooms in education. So they said, okay, you're not going to go to education. Um, I wasn't allowed to do like, so there were certain jobs, like a lot of some prisoners have jobs in prison, right? You can be like a cleaner or whatever. And I wasn't allowed to do like a lot of different jobs because it would involve access to rooms with like digital equipment. So if I was told to clean an education room, well, there's computers in there. So what, like, I was basically treated like a Cat A prisoner. I was told that you can't go to certain parts of the prison. Um, you know, I was like in a single cell. I had all like like the attributes of like a really high risk offender, and
Did you get your own telly?
yeah, they yeah, they did get a television. Yeah.
I
Mm,
only asked because I
mm,
read an article a few years back about
mm,
PlayStations and TVs in prison, and
mm.
I didn't know if that was strictly true or not. But I did read in the paper this week that you can now have a slow cooker in your cell, but that was in the Sun,
Yeah,
which is a very shady
yeah.
UK tabloid for those that don't know.
Yeah, no. So I put in an app. So I was enhanced. This is the fascinating thing because my behavior wasn't bad. I actually managed to get enhanced. So I was being treated as a high risk prisoner with like all of these restrictions on me while being enhanced. Doesn't really make sense.
Did you
But
get the privileges as well then, or?
so I put in an application for like a PlayStation, and security told they like within 2 days they basically told me that I couldn't have one because of the nature of my offense. They told me I might take it apart or something, make it connect to the internet. So I couldn't like have any of the benefits of like an enhanced prisoner, basically. Even like at one point, the like security used to monitor my phone calls to my family. So because of all these restrictions, I was like highlighted to security. So they like every phone call that I would make, they like specifically monitor. Like every prisoner's phone calls like monitored, but with me, it was like every single word. So all of this like going on, and in the end, I just they gave me some like incel education. What they would do is they drop off like this.
Press ups.
Yeah. They don't know. They drop off like this book, which had like just like very basic like mathematics and English questions, like things you'd give like a 10-year-old, I guess. And that
Yeah, not
was
really suitable, was it?
no, and
So you ended up spending. You got a 4-year sentence. I'll take it if you were a well-behaved prisoner, you got let out early. So you did what, 2 years?
yeah. So I did 2 years. I was released, I think, 10 months ago. Yeah.
And let's talk about that day for a moment, because that must have been a big one for you and your family. I suppose, and as you're finding now, 10 months later, the start of a different kind of journey. I suppose the second chapter or third chapter of your life. And what went through your mind when you walked out that door? What's the first thing you wanted to do when that gate rolled back?
So like a feeling of relief just came over me. But the thing is, you get so accustomed to being locked in a cell for like 23 hours a day It doesn't actually feel real. Like when the gates open and you're standing there, it's like a shock because for the last 24 months you've been like used to this routine where you've been in a cell for 23 hours a day, little to no human contact, and then you come out and you're sort of told, okay, you can go into the world now. So that was like, that was like a huge shock to the system. So I think I was just glad to see my family. Really, that was the main thing because I had to. Even though they can visit in prison, it's not 1 hour visits. It's not the
You know
same
what?
as
No,
like.
no disrespect, Daniel, but I bet you weren't
Mm.
as glad to see them as they were to see you out of there.
No, I
You know,
agree.
for
Yeah.
what, 16 when you got arrested? I've got children that age. You know
Mm.
what? I can only imagine. My eldest son's 22, 23 this year, and I can only imagine as a parent what they must have been through. So I suppose a big part now is what happens next. So you've clearly must be under, or I know you're under through previous discussions, some restrictions, and I suppose rightly so. You've still got some of your sentence left to serve. Talk to me about those. Talk to me about what support, if any, you've had since leaving prison. So let's not talk about the probation services in particular, but whether there have been any other support mechanisms other than your family, what's worked, what hasn't, and what's next. Let's talk about, we've got rid of all that nastiness. And yeah, you made a mistake,
Mm.
Daniel. You're clearly a very, very intelligent young man who's got an awful lot to offer the world. The fact that you're on here with me and you've done other shows and you've got your own blog and your own site tells me that transparency and openness is hugely important to you.
Yeah, of
So
course.
what's next?
So it's difficult to say because a lot of prisoners that get released from that get released halfway through their sentence are only on probation. But with me, I have like a serious crime prevention order on me. So it's like this 5-year document which has like 20 or 30 restrictions, and it bans me from like a lot of basic technology. Like I'm banned from VPNs, everything you can think of, really.
Well, I
So,
heard earlier they're no good anyway.
well,
So,
yeah.
sorry, I shouldn't be so flippant. I know I shouldn't, but it did make me chuckle a bit that they just gave you up that quickly. But so talk to me about these restrictions and how they impact you, and what that means to you on a daily basis.
Yeah, so when I was on, like I mentioned earlier, right, my prison sentence was reduced from 12 years to 4. So when I was on bail, I did like a lot of responsible disclosure work. Like I used to, contribute to a lot of bug bounty programs. I used to help like, well, hundreds of companies. I've got letters of recognition from like all different companies. I've got, just
They finally
mm.
started sending them then.
Yeah, finally, yeah. But yeah, so I've got all of these letters and all of these like positive things that I've done, and that was done when I was on bail. But since I've come out of prison, these restrictions have like come into play, and now I can't do a lot of what I used to do. Like a lot of hands-on roles are pretty much out of the question. So, like my ideal like I think the ideal thing that I would like to do in like cybersecurity is to be on a red team. So like like offensive hacking and that type of thing. But it's just not feasible because of these restrictions on me. Like I couldn't even imagine doing that type of thing or even trying to find a way to make it work.
Well, look,
So
unless you've
mm,
signed the National Secrets Act, right, and you're not telling
mm,
me something, to me it seems completely logical for one of our Majesty's departments to come along and
mm,
swoop you up, Daniel, because we see it happening in lots of other countries, and you've clearly demonstrated by your actions helping all those companies and all the other work that you've done to help other people in the industry that you're a force for good now. You would have thought that maybe you'd have had an offer of employment from the government. Is that not the case then, or can you not tell me, or have I
yeah.
really opened up a can of worms I shouldn't have done?
No, no. So So I have a personal experience with this, right? Like I actually posted it on LinkedIn, and like the post got like a lot of views and stuff. But so when I was on bail, I reported a lot of web application vulnerabilities in government websites. Like I was going around, I was finding like non-intrusive vulnerabilities in, like the Parliament's website, the Ministry of Defence, Ministry of Justice, and I reported them to the NCSC, which is like the National Cybersecurity Centre for everything, pretty much in the UK. And in like 2016 or 2017, I had a point of contact in the NCSC for all of these like vulnerabilities. So I submit like I was, working with them, collaborating with them to disclose them. And I had a phone call with the person. And while on the phone, I sort of asked, like, is there any opportunities that like can be like you can give me? This is who I am. This is what I've done, and this is the direction that I want to go in. I want to, use what I have learned for good. And like nothing came of it. I even tried to get myself enrolled in like this cyber challenge program. It's like a cyber prevention program that they run for like school children.
Yeah,
You
which
know. Yeah.
which to me was kind of where
Mm,
I was going with the conversation, Daniel, because you
mm,
are the most perfect person to help
mm,
them with that campaign, because I'm aware of what they're doing there with
mm.
regards to intervention with kids when they get caught and the work they're doing to stop kids getting involved with it. What was the response you had from them?
So with the like NCSC thing, nothing came of it. And like I was told that I don't fit this is going back years before, like years ago before I was sentenced, and I was told that I didn't fit the criteria. So I was basically on my own. They didn't want to offer me an intervention then. It never happened. And I've come out of prison like now, and like there's a few people that have been. So what I get is I get a lot of individual cyber prevent police officers that reach out to me. They ask me if I'd be willing to like contribute to them, speak to school kids, do that type of thing. A lot of it I'm willing to do. That's something that I want to do, because if it can prevent people from ending up in a high security prison or anything like that I went through, then I'm more than happy to do it. But yeah, I get a lot of these prevent officers that like contact me, and for various reasons I'm not permitted to like engage with them. I don't want to go into detail, but nothing ever comes of it. And
Well, that
it's,
I understand
yeah.
why you can't say anything about it, but
Mm,
I kind of can, because it
mm,
isn't to do with me. And I think if anyone's watching this in any of those departments, come on, there's such a golden opportunity for an organisation who are doing huge campaigns about cyber awareness, bringing in new kind of recommendations for exams for people breaking in the industry. It seems crazy to me that you haven't been snapped up. So, after my plea to the government to give you a job, let's let's move back to reality. And I take
mm.
it you're not working at the moment. It must be difficult to find. Are you looking for work? I suppose is the question.
Yeah, so I'm on universal credit. Like that's the harsh reality of the situation. Like a lot of people, this is the thing. A lot of people buy into that stereotype. Like you go to prison for computer hacking, you come out to prison, and you're offered all these high-paying jobs. Well, yeah, that might happen in like the films and movies, but it's not the real world. Like the reality, my reality is that I'm on universal credit. I get paid like £300 a month. You can't really get by, with that type of money. And every day I just sort of look for like opportunities that align and like are compatible with my restrictions. And I want, I'm willing to do pretty much anything that I can to get into the industry, or at least remain in the industry. And
It would be such a
mm,
shame if you didn't remain in the industry, Daniel, because you're clearly very, very talented. Let's cover off then. So there might be some people watching this who could give you an opportunity, and I really hope there is. If there was someone willing to kind of I'm not going to say take a chance on you, because I think you've
Mm,
proved that it would be a chance, but it would be perhaps for some companies going out of their comfort zone, perhaps. What
mm.
what would be the restrictions? What would it mean to them to take you on as a member of staff? Would they have to report anything? What would happen?
So I've got 1 year left on probation, and probation basically expect full transparency. So if I was offered a job tomorrow, for example, I'd then have to go to probation. They'd get in contact with the employer, and then a conference would be set up to sort of look at the role and what it involves. But the other aspect is that they'd also have to speak to the Serious Organized Crime Unit. Serious Organized Crime Unit are responsible for managing the SCPO army, which is another set of restrictions. And it basically just looks like full transparency. So like they'd have to keep a lot of authorities up to date. Whether that's sending a letter every couple of weeks or every couple of months, and that type of thing. But the real obstruction is the restrictions themselves. It's not so much the authorities that enforce them. Um, there's a lot of people reach out to me, and so on LinkedIn, like you have CTOs and CISOs reach out to me, and they try to offer me like hands-on roles and like very practical things, and it's just something that's not going to happen when you realize like the level of obstructiveness that my conditions actually have.
So,
So
the bit you
yeah.
had all the success with, right? So it started
Mm,
off with you identifying all these vulnerabilities. I
mm,
know for a fact there's massive amounts of work for researchers as talented as you doing that job. Do
mm.
your restrictions stop you from being a researcher for a company?
It, it it depends on the type of research. So I like I can go into technical detail on the type of research that I can do, but in terms of like web application hacking and like what I used to do, I don't want to say that it would be impossible, but it would be very difficult to be able to do it. But obviously, there's other types of research like that can be looked at, I guess. Yeah,
There's massive areas of research
yeah.
that could be looked at, but again, it seems a shame if you were in an environment that was supervised, that
Mm.
you're having your hands tied for the thing that you're the best at. Does does that end after 5 years?
So it ends in 5 years, 2026. Which is it does end, but it's still a large period of time considering how like everything that I've been through. Right? I was 13. Like my first offense took place when I was 12, 13. So yeah.
What was the reception like when you came back?
So I think my like family are just glad to have me home. Like I've always been close with my family, so it's like almost like um a level of normality has just come back into existence. Like we always used to be close, and we still are. So it's just like resuming normal life, right? And I think that's the like best thing that's happened. Really, not much has changed, but I say that like in a good way. I wouldn't want like anything to change with them. So yeah, that's the main thing.
That's the happy part. The
Yeah.
frustrating part is the trying to get a job where you're actually doing something decent, and not being wasted with your talent. Daniel, is there anything you want to say before we wrap things up? Because we've gone over time a little bit, 'cause it's been so interesting chatting with you. Is there any kind of message you want to get across to people who are watching?
I think I think I've said everything that I want to say really. Um, I'm
Apart
all
from give me a job.
yeah, that's what I was gonna get to, right? I'm open to I'm open to any opportunities. Like, any employer that like wants to contact me to even have a discussion, I'm more than happy to do. Like, it doesn't even have to involve a job. Like I speak to people on a like daily basis anyway. So yeah, any opportunity, I'll be more than happy to like look at. I guess. Yeah.
So you're open for consultancy work. I take it as well that you're open for connections on LinkedIn. I'll make sure that I drop your LinkedIn link into the comments in the chat below, or not the chat, because we're pre-recorded, in the comments below after this today. Daniel, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for giving up your time. I hope we can catch up on a regular basis. I'm really keen to see where this journey goes, and I've got no doubt maybe you're the new Kevin Mitnick, perhaps. I think, you know, the technology Kevin used. I mean, don't get me wrong, Kevin, you are like a god to all of us in this industry, but it was a few years ago now. Maybe you could be the new inspiration for all the youth coming through to do some good, rather than learning all those skills on try hack me and hack the box for the bad. So Daniel, it's been a pleasure. Thanks ever so much. For everyone watching, please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed our content. We'll be back soon with further episodes. My name's Simon. This has been Daniel Kelley. Thank you very much.